Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning for the ones that are in the American continent. We are having today the last webinar in our series, Innovation in Developing Countries. It is a pleasure to have you all here, and it is a great pleasure to have Professor Michiko Iizuka today to present a very interesting conversation about natural resource and innovation policy in developing countries. I'd like to thank the YSI Latin America and innovation groups for organizing and help sharing the information of this webinar series. And I would also like to say that the previous presentations are available on YouTube, and you can have the access to the link in the event in Facebook. I'd like to present right now Professor Michiko Iizuka. I thank her very much for being here. It's a great pleasure to have her give her speech. And Professor Iizuka is a research fellow at UNU Merit, and she has her interests focused on innovation systems in developing countries and innovation policy. She holds a PhD in Science, Technology and Innovation from SPRU in the University of Sussex, in a place which is also an associate fellow. Our presentation today will have 35 minutes, and then we can open the floor for questions. If you have a question, I'll please tell you to write it in the chat, or open your microphone when the Q&A session starts and ask yourself a question if you feel comfortable with that. And I'll just please ask you not to open your microphone or your webcams during the presentation, because as we are recording it, it will probably have an impact in the final outcome. Thank you very much, Professor Iizuka, and please, the floor is yours for the presentation.
Thank you very much, Danilo, and thank you very much for your kind invitation and an introduction. I'm going to talk about natural resources and innovation policy in developing countries. I hope this is going to be of your interest. Oh yes, I would like to talk in this order. One is, well, first I'm going to introduce, and then I would like to sort of mention a little bit about the book which came out quite recently with me, Jorge Katz, Professor Jorge Katz and Professor Hosono, talking about the Chilean salmon industry, and as an introduction, and then talk a little bit on much broader topic on natural resources and development. And after that, I'd like to introduce some changes that took place with regards to how we're going to look at natural resources from the innovation perspective, and then would like to sort of conclude, to give a sort of a snapshot about what I think is happening with natural resources with regards to innovations. First of all, I would like to sort of introduce what we have done in this book. This is a book that talks about salmon industry in Chile, and this is a very narrow case study on Chilean salmon, but looks at the evolutionary process of how this natural resource industry had emerged and sort of sustained. And it also focuses on the policy, public policy, what sort of public policy should be taking place in order to overcome the market failure, which is knowledge and knowledge creation and diffusion, because at the beginning the Chilean salmon was not, how do you say, it's an indigenous sort of species, indigenous species in Chile. Therefore, the knowledge has to be created, and how they create was to do with some international corporations, as well as institutions like a Fundación Chile. They are the ones that sort of complemented market failure with regards to knowledge creation and diffusion. But then when the sort of industry takes off and increase its productivity and increase its volume of production, then non-traditional resources always have a problem of overexploitations, because that there is no institution that are actually being able to manage the resources in a sustainable manner. So they had this issue about sustainability, and then 2009, I think, I don't know whether you know it well, but then they had a huge issue of sanitation crisis. The fish disease has spread, and therefore they were not able to export. The problem continues, however, that there are some awareness of looking at the regulatory institutions, that some of the firms are now focusing more on having the regulatory institution. It's quite interesting to see that the firms are actually asking the state to place the regulatory institution instead of the other way around. And that is, I think, currently where the salmon industry stands. Of course, there are various, how do you say, trial and error process of learning how much regulatory mechanism is needed and how much is not, how much is too much. I mean, there is always a learning process taking place. The fourth topic that we covered in the book is something that are not being done well, which is a social inclusiveness. Much of the effort at the earlier on when the country is trying to develop is to look at export and then how to increase export. But then they somehow overlook this issue about social inclusiveness and how the regional, the economy would be able to cope with a rapid development of industry of that nature. So this is something that was left out and then still needs to be considered. But so what I'm trying to say is that this is sort of like a story of one single case. But then it does talk about knowledge, sustainability, regulatory institution, and social inclusiveness, which are actually quite important when you talk about public policy. Now, I would like to bring that picture to more generic one, which is to talk about natural resources in general. But when I thought about, okay, what are natural resources? It's actually quite diverse. The book was about fish. And the fish is one of the natural resources that is, well, according to this categorization by Horocki and Kaplinsky, belongs to soft commodities and is a part of the fisheries. But you have hard commodities, which talks about minerals and energy commodities. And this is just one way of classifications. But I mean, having that classification in mind and talk about implication of how it might affect, for instance, advancement of new technology. If you think about that diversity, you can also think easily or imagine easily about how the new emergence of new technology might affect differently in different type of natural resources. And it also have quite different implications to distinctive levels of economic. For instance, macroeconomic conditions. There is a price commodity, there is a price fluctuation. And the price fluctuation is always a problem with the natural resources. But it all depends also on which resources you're talking about. Obviously, if it's oil, it's very big fluctuations, but then it's also controlled with OPEC. But there is also, if it's a rare earth, it's different because some of the actors are limited. Soya, maize versus blueberry and salmon, there are some different fluctuations. Although, I mean, all are affected by the fluctuations of prices, but then where and degrees in which the price fluctuates also differs according to which commodity you're talking about. Another is the method, the industry. What sort of industrial structure you have? What sort of industry? What kind of incumbent firm there are in the economy? That also affects how this natural resource is behave within the economy. And the lastly is the micro. farm or firm decisions, how does it affect it in order to adapt technology or knowledge or move other activities. It all kind of differ enormously, even though that you say natural resources. But if you think about the details of the and diversity of natural resources, all these things are going to differ substantially. So this just to keep in mind when we talk more on the natural resources, because this is something often overlooked when we talk about natural resources, especially the curse of natural resources, which is the one topic that I would like to look at, because that I think is quite interesting to contrast the conventional wisdom from the development economics understandings with innovation understanding when we think about how the potential of the natural resources can be explored. So now I would like to review a little bit on this curse of resources. I think much of your the audience would know about these things. There are various reasons that the natural resources are considered as a curse. And one famous one is the decreasing terms of trade, which is a Prebisch-Singer hypothesis created in 1950s. And it was also later on, I think, substantiated by the data, by Sachs and Warner in 1995, I think. And the argument is that natural resource commodity, when you trade commodity, and then when you export commodity, and then when you import industrial goods, the exporter of commodity would lose out in the long run of the trade relationship, because the commodity is being inferior goods. And whenever technology sort of create an alternative product, then it would be replaced, or it would be so the countries, the commodity producer would lose out. So therefore, that it's better not to continuously producing commodity, but to move to the manufacturing products, was the conventional argument. And of course, that we already talked about volatility of price and demand, that change. And this, I think, is still a big issue. But then how to deal with is also, how do you say, a possible area of research, because that much of this volatility of price and demand in a macro level have been sort of controlled, well, in some countries with the establishment of natural resource fund, or a type of a sovereign wealth fund, where in which that you reserve certain money income that you earned from the natural resources when the time is good, and then use it when the time is bad, so that you have sort of, you are able to create a sort of adjustment fund to control the volatility. But this still is a problem. Third one is a Dutch disease. This also has something to do with the price and the appreciation of exchange rate, because if you have a very strong commodity in your country, then your currency tends to appreciate, which actually undermines the productivity, or undermines the competitiveness of your other, of your different, of your other, how do you say, economic activities within the country, because they would not be competitive to export. So that would discourage the diversification of your economic activity, and therefore this is not a good thing to have, like it is a curse. And the fourth one is enclave, that natural resource industry not being famous for creating backward and forward linkages as compared to manufacturing sectors. And that's also a demand for diversification. And the lastly is more the political conflict and corruptions because of the natural resource, which creates a huge wealth, and therefore the distribution of access would create or give an opportunity for corruptions and political instabilities, which undermines the further development of countries. And these are the sort of like a conventional wisdoms. And then Currently, when you look at the recent issues of Journal of Development Studies and other, they had a special issue on the issue of that natural resource curse, and they say that much of the earlier arguments are now considered inconclusive. And inconclusive from the perspective of macroeconomic understanding. First is because of the diversity of natural resources. You cannot really say much about everything, but much of the discussion probably is based on typical case of extractive mineral resources. But this case is not applicable to all the cases, is what they say that they're kind of come to understanding. And the third is the choice of proxy indicator actually changes the outcome of the understanding which was established, which was the basis of establishing the conventional wisdom. And one study by Bushwhaler and Bolt, they had used a different proxy indicator, and then they changed the mineral dependence to mineral abundance and came up with the different result, which showed that the negative relationship with between natural resources and growth disappeared. So that means that there is no strong indication that the natural mineral abundance actually proves the low growth. And then there are other studies coming out saying that other factors might have been the stronger factor than the mineral abundance. Mineral abundance maybe the merely the sort of factors that showed up, but maybe was hidden. Maybe the more serious factors are hidden under the mineral abundance. One of the which was in institutions, as the Assembled and Robinson's famous book also shows. So I think that the conclusion is that understanding from development economics sort of have a inconclusive understanding about natural resources, whether natural resources actually is harmful for development or not. Now I would like to come to the then innovation study, how the innovation studies were looking at natural resources. And I start also from the conventional wisdom. Okay, first that I would like to sort of clarify that the innovation studies people, I don't know how if this is the right word to group these people, but then the focus is on productivity development. And from that perspective, the natural resource-based activity were low productive, and therefore it was not being considered as a pathway to development. And the reason is because that in order to have a productivity, then you have to have a knowledge, and then also you have to have a structural transformation, which is the relocation of resources to more productive activities, from the low productivity to high activities. On both accounts, the key is knowledge, whether the sector is knowledge intensive or whether that they have possibility of creating productive linkages. And the conventional argument, for instance, if you look at innovation literature, and one of which that comes out is the public taxonomy that categorize all the firms into different types, and agriculture is considered agriculture one of the natural resource activities, is considered as a supplier dominant one, which has, I listed the characteristics as here, the small R&D activities, low engineering capabilities, appropriate less technological advantage, minor contributions to process and product technology, and technology basically come from supplier. So it doesn't really kind of show us the potential areas to be to have a productive development. And to reinforce the OECD classification of high, medium, low technology, this is for the manufacturing sector, but then that also shows that this is according to R&D, and this is how they are they classify. And the medium and low technology involves much of the natural resource-oriented activities. So when you think about, okay, it's low technology, it's not knowledge intensive, and it doesn't have a lot of activities that would be productive, then the recommendation would be to go away and not to focus on it, but then focus on some other sector. But there are some changes. I think that it's interesting changes that is taking place considering natural resources innovation. One is the emergence of new technologies with potential to boost productivity of natural resource-based activities. One could be biotechnologies. The other could be some other nanotechnologies. Another thing related to that is integration of service and manufacturing activities with the emergence of knowledge-intensive service activities. And this would open the possibility of increasing productivities in natural resource-based activities. Another thing that is happened in the last 20, 30 years is the global integration or disintegration of natural resource activities along the global value chains. What I mean by global integration and disintegration is that disintegration entails that the whole process can be disintegrated into a small segment, and each segment has different value added. But these can be integrated by a buyer or by a producer. And for instance, I think let's just go to this slide of the new industrial organization. You can see the smiling curve, and then smiling curve sort of shows the different segment of productions. And each segment has different value added. I think value added on the, how do you say, this line, this line, and then this have different value chain activities. And over the years, according to these figures from OECD, the curve had changed, and then the difference in the value addition had been more enhanced. I mean, what the difference had become a bit more larger. And so that even with the production of natural resources, depending on which segment you are in, you are able to add value. And how you're going to position it is becoming to be a more the issue than what you produce. Another thing which is about new technology that I mentioned is that there are two ways to boost productivity of natural resource-based activities. One is to increase labor productivity by having more productive seed, more productive processing, or having a vaccine. So that means that less salmon would die, and therefore you have better productivity. You also have robotics, auto feeders to the farm, or you can also have chip to the cows to identify where the cows have gone and follow. Mechanical engineering for the input the machineries that you use in firms. And another one is to decrease the negative externalities like water and energy efficient production systems, which would benefit also the productivity, which is less considered in the more popular dimensions, but this becomes quite an important issue, I think, from currently in some industry especially, but also the other industry as well. And another thing is that a development investment in renewable energy sources, especially in the areas where in which that these energy are not being connected from the central grid. And the safety issues for the employees. What sort of, and this picture shows about smart gap used in the mining industry, because in the mining industry, in order to avoid accident, you need an employee to be alert. So they have this device, I think you can see it in the, how do you say, the back of the cap here, that it's a device that sends a signal about whether this person is very alert or not, so that the employee can be able to check or to make them rest in the moment needed. So I mean, these new technologies come in, and then these can be natural resource activity can be a basis for using these technologies if the country has the endowment. And yeah, okay, this is also already quite the same, but then I have a little examples from mining sector. In case of mining, about how the how do you say sectors become knowledge intensive, as well as how the knowledge intensive services become quite large. Okay, for instance, this is a type of mining equipment and technology services coming from the Australian IP report. You can have a lot of different services emerging from natural resources. So it is hardly from the argument of enclave. Now here that you have core engineering, design, project management, you have so many services that can be listed. And contract operation, these are legal operations, other services on equipment and component supplying services, general equipment components, core mining processing equipment, specialized technologies, consultancy services, information technology, equipment related services. So these are all kind of in the mining sector in Australia. And what's more striking is the contribution to this sector in the patent. So this is a patent in mining sector in Australia, coming from the Australia, I think it's Patastat. And the purple one is coming from the mining equipment and technology and services. And then the red one is coming from mining sector itself. And the blue one is the public research institutions. And that this is just to show that the knowledge intensive services has quite a potential to explore in natural resources, and that this also is internationalized very much. And with regards to natural knowledge intensive business services in some industry or the natural resources, is that there's one characteristic that I would like to mention here. That is that it's has to come in combination with local knowledge. That you can see the photo of this monitor checking the salmon in the cage, but you can check that using this high-tech equipment. But you have to have a knowledge about the local knowledge about current, the speed of current, and then how the salmon is behaving in that cage. And so you need to have local knowledge with use of high-tech industry. And the next one on the right-hand side, you have this the soil conductivity, and then this is a satellite image tried to sort of conduct a precision agriculture. That this picture can be obtained, but you also have to have the local knowledge about how the seed would react with soil and in the local context. So always there is a combination, it requires a combination of local and global knowledge to be effectively on the ground. But development of local knowledge also entails high risk, because as you can see, it's very diverse, and therefore very diverse according to specific locations, and that means that there is no scalability of the knowledge. So whoever that is going to invest in the knowledge would have to face a consequence of being risky, because you may not, the knowledge you obtained may not be applicable in other places, and that would require the public interventions in terms of knowledge development. and that becomes quite strongly in natural resource activities. So these are the the characteristics that I would like to explain about the natural resources, and there are some examples about how to link this, or how to develop the knowledge supplier, considering having the knowledge supplier. I mean, this is the case of mining sector, and they have a world-class supplier development program, and then they try to link the mining sector with, and then they try to develop domestic knowledge intensive mining suppliers. And this is also a policy-oriented program. And this is how they first identify the problems having by miners, and then they try to call on the domestic players who can be able to respond to the problems that the mining companies have, and then they try to walk through the problem together, I think, in a limited time period. And I think that during that program, the patent that are obtained by the supplier is going to be stayed with suppliers. The mining companies are not interested in patent, according to the project manager, and then they are able to develop the knowledge, and hopefully that kind of activities are going to be scaled up here on the right hand side, in order to create a set of new industry emerging from the natural resource industry. So this is also one way of development, a new way of development coming out from natural resources. So just to sum up, the natural resource has an important contribution in many countries, in developing and emerging countries. And it has been considered as a curse, but many ways from the development economics perspective, as well as in innovation studies perspective, this idea is now being reconsidered. However, the challenge is that how to then improve the productivity, and that would require knowledge, investment in knowledge, and also to consider about how to integrate in the higher value added or higher knowledge component segment of the whole chain of activities that are now evolving over the at the global level. And that accompanies with an emerging aspect of new technologies and global value chains activities. And another thing that is quite important to consider in this picture is that local specificity of knowledge. And this can be a good thing, because this knowledge, local specificity of knowledge, the local knowledge can only be developed within the countries. And this can be a bargaining chip with the multinational companies if there is any negotiation to be taking place with regards to use of new technologies or use of new knowledge. So there is one more slide which talks a little bit about some interesting area of further research, if my time allows to speak a little bit. I think there are several interesting topics that can be considered for the further research. One is to coming up with how to share the negative and positive externality incurred from natural resources between public and private sector. And so this, the famous negative externality will be environment, and how the environmental cost and benefit can be shared and intergenerational or across the population. And it can be also positive externalities about having resources, how this can be, equally distributed across the population or intergenerationally. Another is, or it is true that natural resource requires investment in knowledge, and this would require the long-term planning and strategic strategy. And there needs to be an institution that actually be able to carry out the long-term plans, long-term experimenting about investing in new technology and knowledge. I think this type of institutional mechanism can be an interesting areas to study with regards to the natural resources. And the fourth one is ensuring how to ensure the welfare, safety, environmental sustainability. The one that the social inclusion part, the fourth point when I was talking about the book, is something still lacking. And with regards to the introduction of new technology, this may also have a quite an interesting topic, especially about whether this technology have the replacing effect on employment or not. And lastly is about the policy approaches that emerging that focus on demand side, public procurement, agenda setting, and systemic approaches towards policy, and how this would play with regards to natural resources can also be an interesting topic to explore. So I think that concludes my presentation, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Iizuka, for this very, very nice and interesting presentation. And right now we have 20 minutes for 25 minutes for questions. So if anyone wants to ask a question, you can either do it using your microphone or writing it here in the chat. I will start asking questions actually because I have some of them. Initially, you mentioned that there are all these critics in terms of a macroeconomic perspective about natural resources, and usually they see natural resources as a curse. But I was considering if we can observe natural resource neutralizing the negative effects that natural resources have, and use it as a complementary way to develop a positive and productive structure. I mean, if you can use the resources from natural resources in order to diversify your economic basis and make a structural change towards sectors with more added value, I can say that way. And I have another question as well. Sorry if it's too much, but do you believe it's possible to use complexity measures? Because we had a webinar about complexity. So if you believe, Professor Iizuka, if you can use complexity measures to actually measure in a sense the technology implied in the natural resources nowadays. So these would be my two questions.
Okay. First question is that you are asking whether the natural resources can be complementary to the diversification of economy.
Yeah, because not only make it specialization in the natural resources sectors, but also use the capitals and the positive.
Yeah. Well, no, I completely agree. I mean, what I was trying to say is that not just, I mean, what I mean in this presentation is to specialize in natural resources, but I'm just saying that the having natural resources is not a curse, but it can be used to diversify economy, as well as to go into different areas. What I'm trying to say is that they use the natural resource as a sort of jumping board to other higher value added sectors. And going into the knowledge intensive natural resource activity is one way, because that it could be applicable to other sectors. Some of the discoveries, I don't know, sensors or vaccines can be applicable to other sectors, and that would allow the country to become more diverse. I am not really sure what you mean by complexity measures.
Yeah, I was thinking about the economic complexity indexes developed by Hausman and Hidalgo.
Okay. And how could this be applied to natural resources?
Yeah, because they try, usually the way they use the complexity measures is to see that natural resources have a less amount of complexity involved in their production. But actually, if you start observing the amount of technology inside natural resources,
do they use the technology? I mean, do they use the production or do they use the export?
Exports, yes, exports.
Okay. So maybe it's just a matter of how the statistics are categorizing it, isn't it? Because it is possible that the diversity in export product in natural resources may not show very well. For instance, what I'm going to tell you this is, because I was trying to look at the blueberries, and then the blueberry is also a complex product, because each blueberry type of blueberry have a different seasons of harvest, and the different season of harvest determines a price, because there is a monthly based price, because that the blueberry is not, I don't know, it's appreciated by fresh blueberries, and which months that you are able to produce can determine the price. And but then the type of blueberries, there is a different varieties of blueberries. But when you look at the trade statistics, it's blueberry. Yeah. You don't classify with the different variety of blueberry just because that this has a differentiated, how do you say, moment of harvest or different functions. I mean, I think that is something that's quite interesting about commodities, because much of the innovation also is in process part, which doesn't show in the statistics with regards to the diversity. So it may have a bit different picture when you look at export data. I would think, but then I have to maybe reflect a little bit with more time to think about it.
Thank you very much for this question. We also have another question from Kingsley Udofa. He says that was a brilliant presentation, and I wonder whether theoretical explanation for innovation in natural resource will suffice to articulate the potentials of financial technologies within the economy and financial systems.
Financial technology within the economy and financial technology.
Yes, Kingsley, if you want to step forward and if you
can you elaborate
the question?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe he doesn't have his microphone right now.
Okay. So theoretical and then in natural resources will suffice to articulate the potentials in financial technologies within the economy and financial system.
Hello?
Hello? Hello.
Yes, this is Kingsley.
Hello. Yes, can you elaborate a little bit more about financial technology? What do you mean by financial technology?
Yes, I enjoyed your presentation. First of all, you did mention about the yardsticks for measuring innovation for natural resources. And I was wondering, can we use the same theoretical basis to explain innovation in financial technology, like fintechs, for the economy? I don't know if that makes sense.
But then you are thinking about looking at the financial technologies applied to the natural resources?
Yes,
Or
I mean, because we're talking about innovation here, and I'm thinking, can we use the same sort of arguments for natural resources? Can we apply those arguments to financial innovations,
financial
such
innovation?
as,
And
for instance, cryptocurrencies or electronic money or things like that? I know this is really out of the range, but I was just wondering.
and then in what sense do you think there is commonalities? Because I think that when you think about it, you probably thought about something that is similar. You know,
Yes.
what is it? What do you think is a similarity? I would be very interested to know what is similar with.
I asked this question because usually when we talk about innovation, there's always yardsticks that a lot of schools of thought have used to measure innovation, such
Yes.
as, for instance, productivity or efficiency.
Yes.
And yeah, so can we use those same sort of yardsticks to measure the impact or the implications of innovations in finance as opposed to innovations in natural resources? Is this still?
Innovation finances, but then you're talking about like a more advanced,
Yes, I
the
admit.
money, the electronic monies, and let me think.
I apologize. This is
No, it's you're talking about how you incorporate the high technology to the services. Is that how you see it as a commonalities? Because I'm trying to look at the natural resources and then incorporating the high tech, and then see
yes.
how the sector would become more productive. That
Yes.
is that how?
I guess my concern mainly is in the theoretical arguments as opposed to the practicals of it, just more the theories and what the schools of thought have, how they've articulated the arguments to explain why innovation should affect development. And I was just trying to think about how we can apply those arguments to other advanced, more advanced levels of innovation. But I admit the question is a bit confusing.
I see.
Yeah, if I may enter in the discussion, actually, uh, we were considering in the future to start a series, maybe for next semester or maybe for next year, related to innovation and financial sectors as well. So Kingsley, if you'd like to
Okay.
to have, yeah, you can also
I
you can also,
apologize.
because it's also a topic that I've been thinking about, and we could also elaborate a bit more on that. And when we have the next webinar series, discuss this topics. Yeah, because it's very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I apologize if I've thrown everybody off, of course. I apologize.
No, that's okay. That's great. That's perfect. Actually, does someone else has a question? Oh yeah, we have another one from Adam Kereni. Uh, yeah, actually, he's answering to
Okay. The
yeah, to Kingsley's question. Yeah, he says that he thinks that theory and innovation theory might be applicable with regards fintech. I have a draft paper on that. Thank you, Adam, for this answer in your paper. Actually, if we could also use it as well in our next webinar series. So if we don't have any other question, I'd like to thank Professor Iizuka a lot for this presentation. It was very interesting, and I think we all learned a lot from that. I will upload that on YouTube, and so we all can have access, especially for the ones that couldn't be here. I received some messages from people saying that unfortunately they couldn't be here because of things that just,
holiday.
yeah, they wanted to be here as well. And this was our last webinar, so I think that the series was a success. I'm happy about the results, and I'm very happy to have top researchers in topics about innovation in developing countries, which is a topic that interests many of us in the innovation research working group and also in the Latin American research group. So I thank you all for that. And I'm still thinking about the next webinar series, which would probably happen in next semester or maybe next year. And I'll keep you all informed about that. I thank again Professor Iizuka for the presentation. Thank you very much for giving us the speech.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for the questions. It was very nice talking to you.
Yeah, it was, I really appreciate it. It was really good. So thank you all, everyone. And thank you for the audience. And thank you, Bessiana, that's also here. She's the coordinator of the innovation working group. So thank you all, everyone, and see you probably in the next webinar series. See you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.